तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति।
Hari Om. Welcome to this big group discussion. We will begin today's big group discussion with some general guidelines. We will begin the questions in the numerical order, that is group 1 followed by group 2, then 3, 4, 5. Each group leader is to identify his or herself as well as the members in the group. If the group has attempted more than one question, the group leader can give the group answer to the first question, and the next one will be answered in the following round if time is available. We'll begin with group number 1. The monitor is Leela.
Can I finish first group 4?
Yeah. I think Thiru would have to leave, so
Sure.
start with group 4.
Group 4. The
Is
question.
this mic usable?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, for this.
Check. Shall I read the? Yeah. We are group number 4. This question number 8 in the group number 4. The question reads like this: there's no joy in the objects of the world. People claim to experience joy. What is this joy that they are experiencing? I will repeat the question. There is no joy in the objects of the world. People claim to experience joy. What is this joy that they are experiencing? Members of the group are the working student, Ruben, Miss Sunita, Mr. Singham, and Miss Rani. Yeah. And after the discussion, the answer to the group is, we have agreed and we got an answer. People find joy in objects of the world, but the joy they gain is not permanent. It's transient. It fades away. Objects.
Could you go slow?
Yeah. People find joy in the objects of the world, but the joy they gain is not permanent. It's transient. It fades away. Object being the same, provide pleasure to one and sorrow to another. It's not the object giving the joy. For an example, a man wants to divorce his wife while another is waiting anxiously to marry her. The woman, being the same, give joy to one man and sorrow to another. However, the man who is marrying the divorced woman is experiencing the joy. Repeat. However, the man who is marrying the divorced woman is experiencing the joy. What is this joy? This example below describes the transient joy experienced in this world.
Sorry, what is that?
Transient joy experienced in the world. The example is, there's no light in the moon.
Sorry, no, could you read that whole sentence
Okay.
After the example?
After the example saying that, however, the man who is marrying the divorced woman is experiencing a joy.
Okay.
What is this joy? We are just reiterating back the question, saying that what is this joy that they are experiencing? So we gave the example of the
He is
joy.
experiencing, not the
Yeah, I mean, in the question, I mean, what is the joy that this man is experiencing?
Correct.
Because we have defined it as transient. Okay, that's not permanent. So the next example is going to explain what is this joy that he is experiencing. There is no light in the moon, but a person can read a book under a full moon light. The moon is reflecting the light from the sun. So in this example, moon is the object, sun is the self, the light is the joy. It is the joy of the self that is reflected in the objects of the world. What is enjoyed is the reflected joy. Again, what is enjoyed is the reflected joy. The light reflected from the moon is similar to the joy experienced in the world. Similar to the joy experienced by the man who is marrying the divorced woman. It differs in magnitude and quality. However, a closer examination to realize that there is no light or there is no joy in the object, which is the moon, will reveal the truth. Maybe there's two analogies there, and it's quite confusing, maybe.
Confusing to you? Or?
I mean,
We are obviously confused. If you can shed some light, it will be good. We are wondering what is the state of the guy who wants to marry now. I don't wonder what is bringing here.
we'll bring the light.
Correct.
We had a debate in the group,
Yeah.
and there were two examples quoted. Okay. The first example is the man A and the man B wanted to get married. This man.
He's already married.
Yeah. This is the woman. This guy wants to divorce, right? And he is not experiencing the joy. This guy actually wanted to marry, and he is experiencing the joy. So, object being the same, one is experiencing the joy, the boy actually experiencing a sorrow. That's why he wants to detest. But can we deny that there's no joy in this world from that question? No, but this guy is experiencing joy. So the question is asking, what is this joy? So then we went to the second example, saying that the sun, which is the self, then you have the moon as the object. then there's a light from the sun, which is given as the analogy of the joy, and reflected to the earth. This is reflection. To the earth. So there's no light in the moon, but what the earth is experiencing is the reflection, which is another joy terminology that you are using. You are experiencing some light reflection from that. That is the same joy that this guy is actually experiencing from the that momentary joy in the world.
So the moment is the moon?
Yeah?
The moment is the moon?
The moment.
The moment
Object.
is the moon.
Yeah.
Worst thing.
So you're saying that this joy that you experience from the self differs from the reflection, which is differs in the magnitude and quality, even scientifically. Right? So whatever that we are experiencing from the world, because the world is made of the self, the Brahman, so you are experiencing the joy from the objects of the world, but it's momentary and transient. So that we related these two examples to come back to the conclusion, to the answer of the group. But maybe the group members would like to add. Initially we didn't have an agreement because there was two examples from both. After examining further, then they said we should use both examples in that text to further explain the artificial joy being enjoyed by us in the world. Because if we eat something or drink something, we can't deny that we are not enjoying the world. But what is this joy? So we said that's actually the reflection similar to this analogy.
We'll pause for answers. We'll take up answers. Energy?
So, very
Is there a
soon,
clarification?
In
Can you-
fact,
just
what we should do is we should open up for the group's participation, and then last will come in.
Okay, alright.
Yes, doctor.
just very soon the man B also lose his joy and divorce her. Is it?
The cycle.
When you say transient
Divorce,
joy,
I'm not sure, but from the statistics, people will lose eventually. Whatever that is nectar in the beginning is
Poison.
poison.
so the woman will end up with a divorce like sometimes.
No.
Just make I think the example by itself seems to be okay. The first example, the second example, but when you try to connect the two, I somehow don't get the
Yeah,
connection of the
same thing.
The example, the many the moon and the moon and the earth and the reflector light by themselves they make sense, but in the final part I'm not getting the connection between the joy.
Unless the
And I'm
group,
not understanding what the joy is in translation.
unless the group wishes to explain themselves. What is
The
what
two
are they
examples
trying
are
to-
fine, but the final connection is not clear.
Yeah, I have that same
Yeah.
question.
When you look at the at mundane level, the first example holds. When you go higher and use intellect, then you look at the reflection of an object as Atman. So everything is Atman, and you get joy of the object is because of Atman, not the object itself.
I'm not sure we'll explain this further, but some people who's wise will say don't get married because they said that's just bringing you back to the worldly life and getting attached and entangled. But some people get advice, right? there's no joy in getting married, but
Excuse me, I'm not finished.
yeah, okay, sorry. Sorry, I thought you silence.
The joy you are enjoying through this reflection is the joy within, the bliss. There's some sort of answer. So that's the joy you actually experience.
Is it wrong to have joy out of contact?
No, we didn't say what right or wrong. We are just trying to explain what is this joy. The question is, what is this joy?
Because we summed up saying that closer examination using the intellect realized that there's no joy in the objects of the moon. Similarly, there's no light in the moon. So there's no joy in marrying that woman, actually, but the joy is in experiencing the joy within, the bliss.
I think somehow that doesn't still ring true, because I think the first example was we classically used to say that it is not the problem is not with the object, it's how we relate to the object. You know, that's how that example came about. Not and that second one was what we're talking about, the false thing where you think the moon is giving the light, where actually the sun is giving the light, it's just reflecting the light. So I think you're taking two different things and trying to connect. That's what I feel. I mean, they are not the same thing. And you cannot say that.
So, are you answering or?
No, I still don't get that connection, because you're taking two different situations which explain two different concepts and then trying to sort of connect together. I mean, that's what I feel, and somehow I still do not get that final connection. Because in that, if you say it like that, then what they're implying in a sense is that the second marriage is going to be doomed, in a sense. You know what it says, a transient and all that, but I don't think that's true, in the sense that it doesn't mean that if you have married once or divorced once, your second marriage is going to be a transient affair and it's doomed to be failure kind of thing. Indirectly, that's what the thing is coming to, because he said it's transient, it's all that, so I don't think that's entirely true, so I don't think you can infer that kind of thing.
So also the objectification of a woman is somewhat unjust.
I mean, it's
You
about.
can take another example like cigarette. One enjoys and the other doesn't.
But I think Raj, I agree with Raj. It's a relationship with the object that's key, which is the message of the first example. It's not the object; it's
How you relate
the
to it.
relationship with the object that was set forth. But does this address the question?
This addressed the question in the second half, because the first half of the example was to reinstate the statement in the question saying that there is no joy in the objects of the world. So the first example is actually reiterating the first statement in the question saying that there is no joy in the objects of the world. That was an example to reiterate back the question and explain the question in a better context. The second example actually gives the answer to the question.
So the joy is from the Atman, reflected.
From the
is
self.
it?
Yeah.
From the
That's
self.
what you're trying to say, like, it's not the object,
No.
but actually it's the Atman
Yes, from
reflecting, like the sun, we think it's
Yeah.
from the moon.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not the moon. The moon is the object which you, right?
which reflects.
Actually, it's the sun that's.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I follow that. That's why I have a problem. I understand the first aspect, and it's your relationship to the object, but that the object being false in some way, that there's something behind the object, I don't quite understand.
Simply put, if you like to eat something, when you eat something, you feel happy. So what is this joy? How would you explain that there's no joy in the world? The first statement is telling you there's no joy in the world. Then, but all of us are experiencing real joy,
Yeah.
right? How do you deny that? So what is that? Then what is that we are experiencing? If you are saying that that's not the joy.
I don't know, you tell me.
So that's the example that we are giving, that it's a reflection of the self that you are seeing in every object and being in the world that's being reflected through it. But it's not 365 days, 24 hours
Yeah, but
every second.
just focus on that food analogy. Then why do you get joy eating one sort of food and not another sort of food?
That's the first example. You're saying that there's no
That's
real
how you get
objects.
to the food.
That's the same example of the first divorce and married.
One man's
That's the
meat-
question.
One man's meat is another man's bone.
Perhaps is it because joy is because you can fulfill your desire. You know you had a desire and that it just fulfills your desire, and because of the mind always impermanence. That's usual is like that, right? You think it makes you happy, you got it. Then after that, once you got it already, you look for something else because it's permanent. You know, you're always looking for something like you are happy you got A levels, you got straight A's, then next one you'll be looking for your degree.
Yeah. Chanchala.
But still, I can't understand the relationship between joy and also self. Can you just explain that a bit more?
Or in other words, how is these two examples connected to each other?
The first one is
I think the group has already attempted to explain. We are going in circles. I think they have made their point and we need to go beyond their answer. If any one of you have any contributions, we could take further. Because they are repeating themselves. So, Kathy, I think we should open the floor for any fresh answers.
Does anyone have an answer?
I have a different answer to this because men and women, how they relate to each other, it will vary with time. Initially, probably when they got married, they're happy. After a while, there was change in their mental, probably likes and dislikes. So they went into a divorce. Now, the second man is relating to the person differently. So joy is inconsistent. If he likes and dislikes. So if you like something, you derive the joy from that. So when you have both two variables here, the emotional status of a man and woman, it's not the same. So there's no way to have permanent joy in, when it comes to like in this situation.
Are there any further answers? If there are no further answers, we'll take up Vinayji's answer.
The question is, there is no joy in the objects of the world. And people claim to experience joy. What is this joy they're experiencing? I think the group has done well in terms of bringing two independent concepts, but they are not able to express or answer the point. Perhaps you have taken an absolute standpoint to say that the joys you're experiencing is reflection of the self. It doesn't really answer the question, because any question you answer can be taken in from a relative standpoint or an absolute standpoint. And the question is being asked from a relative standpoint, and you're answering from an absolute standpoint. Therefore, there is no clarity. So in philosophy, you got to make sure from which standpoint you're answering. So obviously the first half of the answer is very clear with the example you have taken, that there is no joy in the object of the world per se, because if there is any joy associated with an object, it should give the same pleasure content. If it is giving pleasure, it should give pleasure. It should give the same amount of pleasure to everyone who contacts it. If it gives displeasure, it should give displeasure to everyone who comes in contact with it. But it's not true. You can multiply any number of examples. Somebody enjoys solitude, the same solitude can frustrate another person. Somebody enjoys, example, a woman, or cigarette, or alcohol, or
phone.
A phone, or you enjoy a chocolate, or a particular cake, or anything in particular. What you like may not necessarily be happiness in it. So it is true that there is no joy in the objects of the world, so that stands. Now the second half is, people claim to experience joy. What is the joy they're experiencing? In fact, they are not experiencing any joy. What they're experiencing is cessation of agitation. You must understand what drives you to establish a relationship with an object. What is it that driving you into the experience?
A craving.
A craving, in a layman's term, it's a desire. And if you understand desire as an agitation, imagine you don't get the object of desire. You're denied to contact the object. What does that denial do? Agitation. So when you actually get to contact, it is actually the agitation is being released. If you claim that there is any joy coming from the object, then you're refuting the very first half of the statement, first half of the verse, or the question, saying that you're giving some joy to it. The statement is not that the objects have temporary joy, permanent joy. There is no joy. You're giving it a status of no joy. Let's maintain that stance. And why are you saying there's temporary joy from the objects? There is no joy in the object. What you're actually experiencing is release of your frustration. Because the definition of happiness is cessation of mental agitations. And mental agitations is because of the desires unfulfilled. So when actually the object of desire is met, there is a temporary release of frustration. That's all that's happening. But if you say that it is that contact that is giving me joy, then you are refuting the first assumption that there is no, or first conclusion that there is no joy in the object. So what you're actually experiencing is the cessation of agitation. Then where is real joy? Then comes the example which they are given. That's when you resort to that. You've got to establish that there is no joy there. So what you're experiencing is only frustration, agitation. So what takes you to that particular object is that particular desire. Everybody is not running to that same object. Why are they not running to that same object? Because of difference of desires. So each one is running in a different direction with the belief that that object is going to give me happiness. I run for something else, you run for something else, C runs for something else. Why are they running in different directions? Because each one has different desires, and everybody is making a folly, the same mistake of running behind the objects of the world, believing happiness is there. And what makes you believe it is your own ignorance. You do not know the real self. You do not know the source of happiness. That's what Schopenhauer says. It is difficult to find happiness in oneself. It is impossible to find it anywhere else. Schopenhauer also reiterates the same point, that there is no happiness in the world. And if at all you do claim to experience that joy which you claim, is just transient, because the agitation comes back again. It is not a permanent cessation of agitation, it is a temporary cessation. And a permanent cessation of agitation is in self-realization, where there is no desire at all, so permanent bliss. So unless and until you approach this way, there seems to be a contradiction, because the majority believe there is happiness in the world. The first example establishes the point, and that means you got to maintain that point. It seems to be the only way out of it, or one of the ways out of it.
The trick of the whole thing was, the first question was, the first answer was debated upon, and the second answer was followed on, and we couldn't, we understood it, all of us understood the second part, but we are not, since we are not very sure whether it's appropriate for this question, it was put up, both was put up.
It is appropriate, but we are talking from an absolute standpoint. You are not actually answering the second half of the question. The question is the second half. The first half is only a statement. So in effect, the group has not answered the question. We have only talked about concept, but you have not spelled out what is the joy people claim to experience. That's not answered. You have just thrown ideas. Examples are thrown. See, never ever we are advised, never ever use an example to communicate a point, establish a point, and you can give in examples as corroboratory evidences or supporting factors, but don't use an example to convey a point. Example is only meant to Explain a point. So establish that point first. Otherwise, then the example will be quoted out of context. You will have to put diagrams and unnecessary. Whether will the man enjoy the divorced wife, or the divorced wife will enjoy the divorced man, what is going on? It's going into circles and non-essential areas you're going. It's not the objective of approach. You see?
Are there any clarifications? We move on to the next question. Group number 1, the monitor is Leela.
Hi, I'm Leela. I'm from Group 1. Our members are Raju. They all seated together. Raju, Vasanta, Kumaran, Saras and Swarna. So our question is question number 5. Obstacles in the spiritual path. Obstacles in the spiritual path. It doesn't actually say what are the obstacles. It says obstacles in the spiritual path, question mark. Okay. So
we can phrase it as what are the obstacles in the spiritual path.
Okay, so what our group did was first we looked at the definition separately, spiritual path and the obstacles. So spiritual path we defined as the intellect controlling the mind. Spiritual path we defined as the intellect controlling the mind. And the obstacles we defined as the mind controlling the intellect. After clearing the definition, we identified a few common obstacles in the spiritual path. We have identified about 5 main obstacles. I'm going to go through one by one. The first one is rituals or superstition. So I'm going to elaborate a bit more. We're actually born to family traditions which we grew up upon. This impedes our spiritual path. Ignorance may be a contributing factor, and the lack of self-reflection as to why these practices are needed. Another example is mixed religious practices in the same family unit. This may also be an obstacle because there's difference in understanding and practice. Second obstacle is attachments. Attachments in many forms to family, sensual pleasures, and at times to spiritual knowledge itself, to the extent of becoming an obstacle to the real purpose in the spiritual quest. The third one is prosperity or poverty. These two extremities in life may also act as an obstacle, as for those in prosperity may be too involved in their comfort zone that the actual need to seek the spiritual knowledge does not exist, while those in poverty are struggling to make ends meet, and the need for spirituality may be the least of their priorities. Another common obstacle is time. This is what most of us would say as we don't have time. This is probably because we focus our priorities on worldly pursuits such as work, family. Our focus is to earn money, to get position, name, fame, and we also may be entangled in obligatory duties to the extent that the actual focus for spiritual path becomes somewhere lower down that list and sometimes may disappear completely. The fourth obstacle is fear. We may fear to change, that our life may change after the pursuit of spiritual knowledge, and whether we are ready to accept that. The fifth one is confusion. Usually when we embark on the spiritual path, sometimes we get deviated by putting focus on spiritual leaders rather than the teachings itself. That may be one. The other is sometimes after embarking on this journey, there are occasions where we are confused with the information, and this feeling of confusion may act as a barrier. So our group actually summarized that there are many barriers or obstacles leading in the spiritual path. But in reality, our obstacles are actually our mind overpowering our intellect. We have also come up with a suggestion on that we should strengthen our intellect. This is by questioning, contemplating, reflecting, and not taking anything for granted. Yes, and that's the end of our group presentation.
Are there any clarifications to the group answer? If not, we will take up answers.
Other clarification to the answer.
Ask the mic.
Can you explain your definition of spiritual path? Because you said intellect controlling the mind.
Yes.
Imagine a boy has an exam to write and his mind wants to watch a movie. And he uses intellect not to watch the movie and he studies and passes. So you mean that's a spiritual path? Is the definition complete, I'm asking?